Big on the Nirvana this week. Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. Can you tell I don't have an intro yet? I'll figure something out. This week I am coming back to do a follow-up on Audra Winter to some extent, possibly as a case study more than anything else, and to talk really about the nature of drama content, going viral, what happens when you go viral for all the wrong reasons. I thought what I would do is have a little bit of a discussion around that. I'm going to use her situation as a case study. This is some research I actually did a while ago, not official research, but something I did informally a while ago. I knew about the studies that I'm going to mention, and I thought they shed light on why we like drama content in particular. I'm justifying myself here. Why I particularly have become interested in drama, the people who are involved in these scandals that happen online, and how that's changed over the years. So yeah, I am justifying my interest in sitting and watching this material over and over again when I'm too exhausted to do anything else. So we're going to look at the desire to go viral, which was a big part of Audra's life and is very common now on social media. There are different statistics kind of floating around. Different organizations do surveys intermittently, and those surveys are of variable quality because it depends on the questions and how they're being asked. Young people thinking that you can go viral really easily and that's going to set you up for fame and fortune. So I'm going to discuss that. All of this is kind of around me doing some work on supporting a course on digital society next semester. So it actually is part of my work. And I'm going to talk about how authors communicate with their audience a little bit. We're going to discuss the social and cultural context and importance of drama with some hopefully background research and reaction channels, some case studies, particularly Audra's, obviously, because being an author, I think it's a useful one to look at, how not to do things. And right at the end, I might just have a little look at the writing that she's put out there. A little bit of a personal thing coming back to this. I did the original video without a plan to turn the channel into anything. I did actually kind of have a secret ambition that I thought it would be fun to put my academic research onto the internet. I wasn't officially planning to do this launch with, oh my God, I'm going to do this huge thing. And I really felt that I didn't have the time and that my editing skills aren't up to par. I couldn't really take advantage when the video went accidentally kind of mini viral. The creators that I follow all have, hundreds of thousands and millions of followers, and they do videos that produce huge amounts of content. So I wasn't expecting to get, as at the moment I think it's 22,000 views. That really shocked me. I thought I would get 50 and nobody would notice and I could go away and hide in my corner, and then it just blew up. And honestly, the impact is not something you can describe unless you've actually been through it. I should try, shouldn't I? I'm a writer. It was buzzy and weird, and I couldn't concentrate on anything. I was trying to do what I thought was the right thing in terms of replying to all the comments that were coming in. I was in the process of having boiler replaced on the day that it really blew up, and so I was sitting in a room with a guy who kept coming in and out doing things with our meter, and it was really strange. So I think at one point I was just like, please just stop, world. I can't deal with this. It was small compared to what Audra was hoping for. So she was hoping for millions of views on TikTok, and I think that there is a conversation to be had around the way that going viral and being huge on the internet has changed the way we think about people and what you can do with your life in lots of different ways. I was just completely blown away. I do want to say thank you. Obviously, the comments were amazing and so positive. I have grown up I was horrendously bullied at school. I'm really nervous about putting myself out there. I'm fine in front of students for an hour. I will lecture quite happily, but it is nerve-wracking to put myself on the internet out there on a video and then have so many lovely responses. It was a real surprise and kind of awesome. And thank you to everyone who's still watching and commenting and has subscribed. So you're all amazing. I will just link to that first video, and we'll start with an update on what Audra has been doing. It's been followed mostly by book lover Laura, who has been keeping everybody up to date on the strange things that have been happening since then. I'll also link to Reads with Rachel, her review of the situation and the book. Then the queer reader, who has done a two-parter on the book itself and its plot. John at Full Staff Books and The Cozy Creative have both done videos on the situation from my kind of age group perspective, which is a bit older, both coming down broadly on the side of the tradition of the author spaces, not being to dunk on authors or get involved in drama. So I'm potentially breaking that rule there, but I'm really interested in how Audra's situation could be used as an example of the role drama content can play socially and culturally as cautionary tales about how we talk to audiences and how we push back against unethical behaviour that breaches community guidelines but is not necessarily going to get picked up by the mainstream authorities. Now, initially, I was actually going to go back to Jon Ronson's book from the 2010s, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, which is an exploration of the lives of various individuals who went through massive call-outs in the early 2010s on Twitter. Now, Jon Ronson is a great writer and journalist from South Manchester. He's from Hume. And I love his work. He's really funny. He's a great comedian. He is very compassionate. He's done several fascinating podcasts, one that follows sex work and explorations of that in the States. He's a really interesting guy. Now, the book he wrote is fascinating. However, the culture has shifted dramatically from where it was when the book was researched, written, and published. So Jon Ronson deals mostly with people who had one big blowout bad moment. The big one is the Justine one, where she just put one horrendous tweet about going to South Africa, and she arrived, and in that time the internet had picked it up, and it went horrendous. It was just, it was a terrible tweet and horrible, but he covers that story. So he deals with what happens to people after that, but very much in the context of what the culture was like in the 2010s. Now, even going viral for positive reasons has a huge mental health impact. I felt that I could not function for a few weeks. I had just put out a video which was just like, I think I have something to say about this, but it wasn't and I've got 10 videos lined up for the next 10 weeks to build my channel and do all the rest of that and get monetized. I was just like, this is what I want to say and I'm going to go for it. Jason Russell, who's the man behind the Coney 2012 viral moment, had a full-on mental breakdown and spent time in hospital at the absolute peak of the video's popularity. We are not, as human beings, designed for that level of attention, whether it is positive or negative. I think Audra's example is a very good case study in looking at how chasing that kind of viral moment can make you feel really good. You feel really good having that positive attention. But if you don't have something to follow up with, it's very ephemeral and it just disappears within a moment. And then if you go viral again and you get a lot of attention, and then it goes wrong, which is what happened in this case, you are left with a terrible situation that is really, really difficult to navigate. And it's honestly the thing that terrifies me. You know, what if I made a mistake? As somebody who is autistic, which means that I struggle with social communication, with reading the room, and that is any room, which includes the YouTube room and the room when I go outside, I really do end up being scared all the time that I'm going to make a mistake that I won't see coming. And I have become someone who tends to read and research excessively, and I've been anxious about putting out videos again in case I make some kind of horrific mistake. Now, I'm a fan of both Kiki Chanel and Swell Entertainment, and they've both done recent videos a few times on another side of going viral, which is one quite relevant to Audra, and that is the idea of seeking it out because it's going to be life-changing, and that if you become big enough, you will somehow be able to escape the horrendous rat race. Anyone who's seen Severance will know that that is a perfect portrayal of what corporate life is like, doing a regular job. You will be able to earn an income that will support you in what are really unstable and difficult times. I can see the appeal. Like, I'm an author. I'm supposed to want lots of people to look at my work, but the idea also simultaneously terrifies me. Kiki and Amanda both have focused on how people tend to think that blowing up like that will lead to big financial changes and enable you to completely change your life. The most recent salient example is Hub's Life, who gained this huge following because he did boring content about having a boring life. I believe he had tried to be a content creator in the past. It hadn't worked out. So he started doing these very calm, very quiet videos where he was just preparing to go to his everyday job. He went and worked in an office. He was just videoing himself, putting his things in his bag, going to work, going to lunch, going to work, do more work, and then going home. And he blew up on that. He developed an audience who were all people who have to do that. The problem for Hub's Life is he got a big following and he decided that he would quit the boring job that was actually providing him with the content, and he ended up thinking that he could make money online being a content creator. And he initially lied to his audience, I believe, by hiring an office and just sitting in it and pretending that he wasn't doing what he was doing, which obviously breaches that essential trust that we are trying to develop as people making content on the internet, so that as an audience you will trust the person that you're listening to and develop, I mean, we're talking about parasocial relationships, but you will develop a sense of trust that this person is reliable, that what they're saying is the truth, and that you can kind of depend on them for that sort of emotional resonance as well. But he lost all of that because he lied to his audience. I don't want to think about what he's doing now, quite frankly. The problem is that on YouTube and all of these other social media networks, watching videos is free and the conversion is very low. So you're not necessarily going to get what you want out of creating content if the end result is making millions and being able to quit your really, really stressful job. I'll just pause and say, I did get monetized, probably as a result of that video. I am the example from Book Lover Laura says at one point, you know, this drama has launched people's YouTube careers, particularly the queer reader has been able to take off. I'm super proud of them for being able to do that. I think that's fantastic. It is challenging. We're going to get into that in a little bit. I was just monetized last week, but it is tiny. My main motivation is to talk to people about my research and the work that I do because I think it's fun and interesting. And I very rarely get to talk about it, to be quite honest. I've been invited to do a talk next year, but I don't get to talk about it very often. And it is just nice. Academics, we love to talk about the stuff that we do. Now, Audra has fallen into the same sort of trap as Hub's life, she has spent a long time trying to go viral to emulate the success she thought she'd get from this earlier viral moment that she had. And I think if she had already got a completed book that was really, really good, highly edited, very polished, and available and ready to be bought already, it would have triggered the kind of success that she wanted. Since the fallout from what has happened in August, things have gotten very weird. This is a pattern that I've seen a lot as someone who follows drama, especially with someone who is new to having something big happen. There are people who are just chronically trouble, and when something happens, periodically they're boring for a really long time, and then something big happens and everybody sits up and goes, "What are you doing?" We'll get to that as well, so put a pin in it. After the fallout from the book going badly viral as bad, and her responses not measuring up to what the audience required, she initially said that she was going to update weekly, that there would be a Q&A, and she was using this rhetoric that is the team and we are doing things, as if she were, I don't know, Apple? Tim Cook? I don't like to think about it. It's uncomfortable. That way of talking just doesn't feel right. And I am going to talk about that. Pretty much everything she did made things worse. The weekly updates went for about 2 to 3 weeks. If I had been betting, I would have said, yeah, that's not going to last. And it didn't. That fell apart when the responses were mostly negative, and she released a Q&A by the editor, and it was bad. It dunked on other authors, and we mentioned not dunking on authors, but published authors with a huge following. And we can have a whole conversation about the quality in Fourth Wing and Powerless, and rant reviews that go on for hours about them. My favourite thing to watch while I'm cooking or doing the washing up. That's just not something you should do, especially when you are fighting to get back the audience's goodwill. And people are now watching you, and they are watching you critically. She then did this bizarre rebrand PR setup video where she kind of tried to reintroduce herself, but it was the same as everything else, and it didn't make any sense whatsoever. She then stopped updating after a couple of updates. She shifted her attention to Patreon, so she hasn't updated TikTok for a number of weeks now, since the middle of August, and attempted to get more people to subscribe that way, presumably because she wasn't getting many people to buy into the second edition release. Most of that is artwork. Once a week there is a little bit of free material, putting it behind a paywall, presumably part of the need to keep going financially. So she or somebody associated with her has attempted to get angel investment funding, which just... I keep thinking of this in terms of, what if she was one of my students and I didn't realise that you could make that many bad decisions in so short a time, but it turns out that you can. Now, she has, as of writing, mostly handed off her Patreon to her team, who are all artists apart from that one editor, while she moves to Finland. As a Moomin person, I would love to move to Finland, but in context, this is just getting more scrutiny, and it's unclear what's going on. There's lack of clarity around what's going on there. Wanting to be closer to Sorley is one of the reasons. Sorley is meant to be one of the important people as part of this. Spending 3 hours talking to him every night, I think, was the idea behind the original plan. None of this comes across well, and it magnifies each stage of the process of doing something after a bad fallout. Can either make things better or they can make things worse, and this has made things worse. there is a lack of perception of how things are coming across and a lack of thought going into how things are perceived. The audience is being ignored, and that is a big problem at this moment for anyone who's going through something like this. The moment the audience themselves and what they want is being fully ignored, that becomes a serious problem, and the lack of trust is, you can't come back from that. Now, I originally suggested that the best and only sensible course of action at a time like this is to follow the mode of the internet apology. I mentioned Mika's rhetoric as a very good examination of how apologies work and what you need to do as someone who is making an apology in order to restore the audience's trust. You're reaching out as an individual. It is necessary to be vulnerable, but also to appreciate that you have made a big mistake and you are seeking an extension of trust, or you're putting out an olive branch to try to get that trust back by being vulnerable, by being prepared to acknowledge that you have made mistakes and that you maybe have caused harm. Now, there is the issue of refunds, which is complicated because I had spoken to Perry Legend. She commented on my Substack, and I have to apologise for not responding. But there is a potential issue with the refunds that goes beyond people not getting refunds for books they didn't like. I fully accept you should not really get refunds for a book just because you didn't like it. But there are people who potentially have not received the book that they've paid for, and that's a whole other can of worms that is potentially sitting out there. So I don't know. I did briefly look into the FTC guidelines around that, but obviously I don't want to level accusations that may be inaccurate because I'm not sure if people have not received books that they actually paid for. The thing is, when you do something like this and when things fall down, everyone starts to scrutinize you. We are by nature as humans part of community, and part of community means extending trust to other people, even strangers, because you have to be able to bring people into your community. So we are willing to extend trust to people. When I put my video out, people were prepared to extend a particular level of trust to me. And it's important to honour and respect that trust. So when things go wrong and everyone realises that they can't trust you, they start to investigate you. I think there are limits to how much you can do there. I want to highlight that you should not go and dox her by her real name. You should not go to investigate her house or find her or try to engage with her or anyone associated with her directly. You should not do that. That is part of the audience holding itself to account in a situation like this. There are always going to be people who don't. And part of the problem with this method of handling situations on the internet is that you're reaching potentially hundreds of thousands of people who are all responsible for their own actions and may make choices that are actually detrimental. We're going to come back to that. I've got a lot of pins in things today. You have to think very carefully in situations like that about every move you make, everything that you do, and how it's going to be received. I'm just thinking about the Lindsay Ellis situation because she went through a bad moment, and people went as far as, and there are bad faith actions and interpretations. You have to be very careful as an audience member about how you interpret certain things, and being careful not to leap from here are some of the facts we have to wild speculation becoming fact. And increasingly in the true crime space, for example, we're seeing how audience members step outside the bounds of what is acceptable behaviour, and even creators are stepping outside the bounds of what is acceptable behaviour. in terms of going and doing their own investigations and believing things and rumors spreading. As an audience member, as a creator, you have to step back and say, really, what can I say is true? And what limits do I set on my own actions here? Which is partly why it's taken me quite a long time to decide to do a second video and to think very carefully about how I framed it and what I wanted to say if I did a video at all. Now, some people are going to have empathy and extend that empathy a really long way. Very interesting that Audra has had a lot of empathy extended to her, but I think potentially because the first time you kind of breach community ethical standards, there is a certain degree of willingness to give you the benefit of the doubt, shall we say, but that is contingent on social and cultural factors. So if you are young, you are white, we could probably also throw male in there for good measure, and you appeal to a similar group of people, they are going to extend you more empathy because that's the empathy they want to see extended to them. You also get the attention of people who will be absolutely merciless. And the longer a drama or a scandal goes on and the worse the creator at the heart of it responds to things, the worse things get. And the more critical people become, the more angry they are, and the more likely they are to do deep investigations because you've breached the trust and people do take it too far. Now, this is where we're going to come into the issue of scams and drama content. So back when Jon Ronson was writing, going viral in the worst way did not really have the same monetary aspect to it. 10 years on, post-pandemic, we are living in a time of just constant scams and having to be on your toes, scam-wise, literally all of the time. Saying something dreadful on Twitter in 2012 is not the same thing as trying to sell a bad book on TikTok in 2025. It is also not the same thing as the endless rug pulls that are happening at a higher level. I mean, trying to sell a really bad book is one thing, but the level of scam that's going on lately it's off the charts. Now, adding that financial element to issues means that you are adding weight to the seriousness and also to the potential sort of value of drama content in that sense. So for this, I dug into some research about the role of reaction and drama content on YouTube. This research I originally looked at when H-Bomber Guy released his video about James Somerton, the plagiarism and YouTube video, and he mentions drama content and he calls it the worst corner of YouTube and is extremely critical. And there were a lot of people who were actually really annoyed by this and wanted to call out to say, actually, what we do has a social and cultural value. He is trying to highlight the fact that people reproduce bad, poorly researched, speculative content that is purely based on vibes and does not contain accurate information just because they're trying to monetize and capitalize on a trending situation. They just want to make the money from views. And the drama content creators pushed back because they felt that what they were doing was valuable either in their specific community or on YouTube more generally. What drama videos and channels do within the broader community is that they hold creators and others to account when their behaviour violates accepted norms or even break laws, but are unlikely to face much in the way of accountability for that. In 2022, Rebecca Lewis and Angela Kristin, I'm going to mangle their names, I'm sorry, published a study in New Media and Society that looked at Dramageddon 2.0. And again, Baker's Rhetoric, she's the star of this video, to be honest, has done a deep dive into Dramageddon 2.0. That is the beauty drama around James Charles. I don't actually follow beauty drama. I don't know why, it just isn't a sort of thing. It's really fascinating. Someone should do a study on what drama people follow, because sometimes it's associated with something that you do in your life and sometimes it's just not. It's fascinating to think about what appeals to you and what doesn't. Anyway, back on topic. I was fascinated by this, and what Lewis and Kristen had done was look at many of the videos produced around the time, and they conducted interviews with some of the creators. So they draw out especially the contradictory and complex nature of cancellation and call outs. On the one hand, creators want to ensure that their audience know the facts and are informed, and that the person at the heart of the drama is called out for their behaviour in the hope that they will change that behaviour. However, creators are also aware that there are economic factors involved. A creator is conscious after monetization, especially, that they need to think about, are they going to do a video about something? Are they going to get onto this trend, partly because they have an interest in it, partly because they need to remain monetized? That pressure becomes instant. It's something that I've been conscious of and feel a little bit strange about. I didn't realize it was all going to happen so fast. Now, they are trying to deal and live with that tension between seeing a story as it unfolds and sharing the news and keeping the community informed, and also the way that they benefit financially with views and subscribers. Now, of course, the fact that they benefit with the views and subscribers and the monetary gain allows them to continue to do a job that would otherwise not be done in this space. So there is that to be aware of. But yeah, that's me being dragged on, Maine, particularly because I was monetized. I was in the middle of working on a fellowship funding proposal that is partly built around finding creative ways to help people engage with archaeology in ancient world museum exhibits. So it's my way of combating the absolute deluge in pseudo-archaeology that we're facing without doing precisely what Flint Dibble and Milo Rossi have done. So I don't feel entirely comfortable going on Joe Rogan to argue against Graham Hancock, and I'm deeply grateful to Flint Dibble for doing that kind of thing, and also to Milo Rossi, who does these intense videos pushing back against creators who are sharing misinformation. Now, I'm still scared of being attacked by the mob, I think. Obviously, book lover Laura pointed out in one of her videos that the scandal around Audra had launched YouTube careers. And it does put you in a tricky position because you're immediately faced with the tension around wanting to provide a contribution to the discourse that's valuable and not pile on, recognizing that there is a human being at the heart of this, but also effectively call out behavior that otherwise won't be seen or held accountable. So Lewis and Kristen highlight that YouTube drama illuminates important dynamics of the power struggles over accountability, morality, and authority taking place on social media. They also remark that even though it would seem like there's a defined beginning and end to this, in fact, it's an ongoing process of reassessment and consideration. We saw this play out with Audra, as many creators were initially sympathetic because they felt a certain connection to her youth and likely naivety. But how you behave after you do something like that, breaching community expectations, strongly influences how the community interacts with you. And which is why I've kept thinking about the need to apologise and take the financial aspect out of the situation. That has to go immediately. Because once that is on the table, that is affecting people and their ability to live. And to some degree, you have to take responsibility for your choices as someone with money. Are you going to spend it on this creator whose writing you've never seen? But on the other hand, if they have extended a promise in terms of we will get you a book and then they don't get you a book, that is another kettle of fish. The most important factor here is the space where the most important factor to think about here is that this is the space where people who do not have much access to the public sphere are able to have a voice and call out unacceptable behaviour that can be received by an understanding audience. And this is something that Lewis and Kristen highlight. They especially note that this is important for marginalised voices, Black, Indigenous, LGBTQIA voices that are actively now being silenced for much bigger reasons, and who are more often the victims of these kinds of events and are more marginalized in terms of their ability to recoup financially, especially if they're caught up in a very, very big scam. Now, YouTube and social media more generally present the opportunity for real pushback against damaging behaviour, as well as thorough investigations into misbehaviour that right now especially just go on unchallenged. So the very, very top level, we have creators like CoffeeZilla, that is Stephen Molyneux, and he's also Voidzilla. So his channel had a problem a couple of years ago, and now he has a second channel which also has millions of followers. He's right now embroiled in a long lawsuit with Logan Paul over what Logan Paul has been doing in the world. And he is one of the only people who was prepared to call out Sam Bankman-Fried in the point when things were going wrong at FTX, and Sam decided to do a series of calls with a load of journalists. And Stephen went on to all of those calls. And he was the only one prepared to push back and challenge with thoroughly researched and thoughtful questions that challenged Sam's truths and what he was trying to claim. Now, if you're interested in that, you can also look up Zeke Fawkes' book, because Zeke Fawkes was also around and investigating NFTs and crypto at that time, and he wrote a fantastic book about it. Robert Evans, Behind the Bastards, did a great deconstruction of how mainstream media, organizations like Sequoia, just kind of thought that SBF was amazing. And then you have Michael Lewis, the author of The Big Short, who was writing effectively a hagiography of SBF and continued to be a supporter all the way through the legal case that followed. That kind of possibility is presented by YouTube. That's people who are fully independent of established mainstream media, when they are working from an ethical framework, can do amazing work in the world and create change. We also have the work that H-Bomber Guy, who now only needs to produce one video every couple of years and just hit like a bomb, appropriate name, he called out James Somerton a couple of years ago and did a very deep dive on him and Illuminati. You can see how there is a way for people to find a way to access restorative justice, to find a way to access support when they are not able to do so via other means, as particularly when more financially capable creators are able to try to shut them down using the law. Now, we've seen, particularly this summer as well, within the book community, a series of conventions that all seem to be either really, really poorly thought out bad decisions, or they were scams. I don't know either way. I'm gonna try and skirt around. I know that there was one which involved a case of SA. I think that is a far more serious issue that I'm not going to cover here. But the conventions that have been covered by the YouTube community, sort of Swell Entertainment has done some, and Kiki Chanel, interestingly, has done a deep dive on her own particular fandom, which is the Vampire Diaries. And I wouldn't know about this. As somebody in her comments actually said, oh wow, a 2-hour video deep dive on something I know nothing about, which I'm prepared to watch and engage with. And that engagement, even if you know nothing about it, becoming aware of it and making it part of the community discourse, and often enables creators to be held account in a way that they otherwise wouldn't be. These people are not held to account unless you have YouTube channels, multiple YouTube channels, discussing the issue and raising the problems to a wider audience. And just by watching the video and engaging with it, you are participating in ensuring that there is a better chance of there being restorative justice. I'm going to mention why I keep mentioning restorative justice in a little bit. Now, on a much smaller scale, we have Gore World, which is where I have to hold up my hand and say, yeah, this is how bad it gets when I am deeply, deeply stressed, when I am deep into marking territory. And I have had to mark 10 almost identical essays in a day, and my brain just completely melts. If anyone watches this and you have ever had to grade university undergraduate papers, you will know what I'm talking about. You have the curl world horror. There's a positive and there's the negative. Does it even work? Does highlighting what people do when they misbehave online, does it have any particular effect? Now, as I mentioned before, Chris and Kristen talk about how it's complicated and you have this endless reconsideration. You have the one-offs where someone comes and they do something bad and then they apologize and then they go away and they just disappear. And then they might come back in a couple of years. They might try things again. It might go well, it might not go well. We'll get to that. Literally, just this week, just the day before I'm recording this, another drama from someone who has been offline because of previous drama and has come back and just done the worst things. While I was sweating over my catalogue essay in the summer, things went utterly bonkers in Girl World. I find drama fascinating to watch, partly because no matter how much fiction you read, people will always be weirder in real life. People will always do like the most unexpected thing. I've got a feeling that if someone did the plot of some people's lives and they wrote it up as a book and tried to pitch it, people would just look at that in the publishing world and just go, no, there's no way anyone would do that. And I'm like, go and look at Girl World. It's happening on the regular. I find it very confusing the way people behave. And as an autistic person, I am fascinated because I don't understand it. I wonder also if one of the reasons why drama, particularly now, has become more interesting to people is because mainstream entertainment has become so boring and repetitive. And I don't care about the 800th Marvel movie or series coming out, but did you hear about how Chantal, she stole a cat for a grift in Kuwait, got called out by a cat charity and then ends up in Syria? I actually took that to my therapist. This is me going off script. I went to my therapist and I said, yeah, I'm really struggling. I'm watching drama content. I'm sorry. And then said, did you know she's gone to Syria? Yeah, she's trying to get her audience to pay for her to get out of Syria now. Milk Tea actually did a really good React video, and at one point she talks about the issues around bringing things and making them financial, and it is well worth looking at that and how she analyzes and discusses the issue of trying to make your audience pay for things, which is worryingly close to what Audra has been doing. Now, and then we have the problem of other people who become so huge that no amount of calling out does any good whatsoever. We have the Mr. Beast AI thing, which I have not been following, but just no horror. For all the work done by creators to call out people, there are the serial problematic cases. The no amount of calling out Logan Paul has worked up until now. And on the micro scale of Girl World and BookTube, creators who do this seem to be able to kind of keep it going. They will always have a small fan base that just seems to support them regardless of what they do and regardless of how many reactors say to them. She is, or he is, doing things that are harming you. They don't care about you. They just want your money and they will do anything to get it, in my opinion. And then, of course, we have the go away and come backs. Fulma. This is just in the last couple of days. I decide to spend a week doing YouTube videos and then this happens. It all goes off at once. Fulma, one of the Try guys, who was the wife guy, and he made having a wife his whole personality, and then it turned out that he had cheated on her. And he has now done a podcast that is him interviewing his wife about the fact that he cheated on her. It's dark and awful. I did watch some of the Penguin Zero commentary on it and some of the other people who have commented on it. And this seems to be what happens, is that once people enter the pipeline from being a reasonable creator to being unreasonable, the Try guy has tried to come back. Bad joke. It has not worked. It is very, very bad. We see an inability to really step back from what you want as a creator and think about the audience and what you are doing for the audience and how you benefit the community when you come back, and not just think of it in terms of this benefits me, I'm fine, I don't really care about anybody else. James Somerton actually does seem to have been fully cancelled. I've seen a couple of places where people have said, oh, he's trying to come back, but I haven't seen anything. Now, here's where we get to the restorative justice bit, because the last couple of weeks I follow Matthew Facciani on Threads. He is well worth following as a researcher. I believe he has just lost funding because he's based in the States, and now we're facing this critical issue of funding loss to vital research across both the sciences and the humanities. But he shared some research that suggests that people on social media consider restorative justice more effective means of handling misbehaviour than vigilante behaviour. So I will link to the study down below, but it suggests that overall people want to see a positive outcome when people break social, cultural, or even legal codes. We don't, as a species, we don't want to push people out unless they really have breached and show no signs of wanting to come back into community and to behave appropriately. And I think that is why we pull punches, and it is why we extend trust to people, at least initially. So that's, one potential explanation for that question, particularly in the case of Audra. If you keep pushing the limits of that trust and you violate that trust and those ethical codes, then that kindness runs out. To go back to Audra and whether it was a scam from the start, that we can't know. That's my take. I honestly think if a student had come to me at this point where she is, I would say just massively apologise, honestly, as one single human being. Forget the team talk, forget the I'm the next Tim Cook, I'm the next Elizabeth Holmes, and just say, I am so sorry that I did this. I have let you all down, and then step off the internet for several years, come back later, get a job, do the naturalist thing, do something else. The problem that we have in the drama space, very much with things like that, particularly because creators can withdraw, is that we only see a fraction of the information that's available, and we have relatively few facts compared to how much we can speculate. So we can't see behind the scenes, we can't see the discussions and decisions that are being made, and we have a desire to speculate. We want to fill in the gaps. We love a mystery. I think this is partly why we like drama, is we love a mystery. We want to see how things unfold. We want to understand it. I've seen some people suggest that it was a scam from the start. I tend to stick to the maxim that you should avoid ascribing to malice what could reasonably be explained by stupidity and bad decision making. I don't know what Audra's background is in terms of finances. It looks like on the surface a series of really, really poor decisions that haven't been thought out. Nobody around her seems to be paying attention to how these situations play out, how to manage these situations effectively, and really how to think about Audra as a person and what in her as an individual might appeal to the audience and win back that trust. Now, I happened to stop here and I started scrolling, as you do. And the first thing to pop up was a study released today, on the personality traits that affect your ability to handle negative feedback. And I thought, I know, I'm going to put this in. So I'm going to link to the article and the journal study in the description. It suggests that when you have a very strong particular self-concept, that can make it harder to accept critical feedback. So I will read you the abstract. When faced with self-threat, people often engage in self-protective reactions, yet not everyone does. The extent to which self-protection occurs is thought to depend on people's personality. We put this claim to test by considering multiple personality traits from different content domains. In an experiment, participants number 1744, so a reasonably large study, performed a bogus performance test and received negative versus positive feedback. As an indicator of self-protective reactions, we assessed participants' tendency to question the validity of the test. We found that high self-esteem and high narcissism predicted stronger self-protective reactions, particularly when these traits were assessed in the content domain targeted by the negative feedback. So that is anything particularly associated with people's self-identity tends to be more triggered than something that isn't closely tied to your self-identity. Contrary to our hypotheses, the self-insight motive and mindfulness also predicted stronger and not weaker self-protective reactions. That is fascinating. That is fascinating. And it does make the study well worth reading, because it means that it's really important to consider, when you think you have personal insight, do you have personal insight, or are you perpetuating an image of yourself and your own mythology about who you are? It goes back to my first video on the Audra problem of the gulf between how you are being received and how you view yourself, and when that comes up as a problem. That's something to bear in mind, that we actually have to be really careful that we might not be as insightful about ourselves as we think, and that thinking that you're insightful about yourself and your reactions is possibly part of your self-mythology. Be careful out there. It's kind of scary, because mindfulness is generally seen as a means by which people become more self-aware and they become able to handle situations better. Obviously, that might not be so true. Now, I'm cautious about throwing around terms we can't diagnose from a distance. I see, the word narcissism used an awful lot, and it has been used for Audra, although I think that a lot of her communication is highly impacted by being autistic, and is part of a tendency in autistic individuals. Certainly something that I used to suffer from. Many of my commenters said that they saw themselves in those kind of reactions. I think most of what we have seen since the initial fallout from the book is probably mostly down to self-protective mechanisms, compounded by the need to deal with financial problems that ensue. She made a series of bad decisions even in the run-up. I think she gave up her job. She was using her scholarship to fund all of this. And while she's trying to be ethical on the surface, the anti-AI stance doesn't sit well with the tech bro, tech cis aesthetic at all. Now, on a personal level, as an author and a writer, I'm entirely baffled, because that aesthetic does not fit with the mode of an author or a creative. Now, authors, no matter how big they get, engage with their audience as individuals. That's the rhetoric of even Stephen King, comes out and says something and people contribute and say things back to him. The idea of calling this, the World of Guardian LLC, particularly at the moment when we are all cancelling our Disney subscriptions and dealing with big corporations, bowing to authoritarian rule, all of this feels like, why would you want to deploy that aesthetic? Have you thought in any way about why you are deploying that aesthetic? It doesn't feel like a good choice. I'm really intrigued actually by the decision to do that. So, people become fans of brands. That's the thing that people do. People are massive fans of Apple as a brand, and that's a different form of social engagement around products. People are fans of PlayStation, people are fans of Xbox. People develop attachments to things and to brands. But she was smart in realizing very early on that people respond to visual content more than they do to written content, because you can just see it and go, well, that looks good, therefore it must be good. I think she does have this dream of being a massively successful published. I suspect that the use of all of these terms like team and the weird fact that the numbers keep changing, it's all very strange, is just part of trying to make the dream happen without having the underlying book that is what everybody really wanted in the first place. Going back to sort of being in my early 20s, it's weird. You have all of your life in front of you and you think everything has to happen right now, because it's all got to be instant and you want to get it sorted out and figured out. Now, 46, nearly 47, still having not figured anything out. I mean, when I was 24, 25 and writing the original Amnar series, yeah, I wanted it to be huge and do something enormous and have a big impact. It does feel like that's important at the time. The benefit of getting older is going, actually, well, I have less time, but somehow it's more meaningful, and that you do have time to do things. Now, there's a great video by Lynn D. Young about the problem of the prodigy and the tendency to think that you need to do things very young in order to be special. It turns out that prodigies just start earlier. By the time you are an adult, you are just like everybody else. I don't know. If anyone watches this and is a fan of the series Numbers, I was a huge fan of the series Numbers, which is two brothers, one of whom is a police officer and the other one is a numbers genius at a university who is a mathematics prodigy, or he was. And they are solving crimes. So, great premise. And he is struggling with the fact that he's an adult and he became a professor really, really young. But he's now just average because everybody else caught up with him. And this is something that Lynn brings out in her video, is that actually we obsess over the idea of people being able to do things really young, and that obscures the reality of the benefits of being older. I say being an older person. So justifying my existence. Now, my personal suspicion is that pretty much everything since the fallout from the publication has been a desperate scramble for financial survival. She did mention quitting her job, using her scholarship money to fund what she was doing, and that's potentially left her in a difficult position financially. It is not down to the fans to solve that problem. Absolutely, honestly. It is not down to fans or anyone to support to get someone out of that financial hole. As we're seeing in Girl World right now, the same thing applies. First time, 10th time you do this, you have to go away and solve the problem. Either you put out really, really excellent content for people, or you go away and you find another way to solve that financial problem. I'm sort of done with the drama now. I'm going to talk just a little bit, just a couple of notes that I picked up. Possibly shouldn't be doing this. I'm not dunking. I think it is interesting to have a little bit of look at what she has posted, but this is not dramery. This is me talking about being an author and thinking about that kind of things. I like the idea that Stephen King suggests in On Writing, and I have some critique with his stuff, but I liked his idea that you should do the whole book with the doors closed, and you get it to a state that you think is good. It has to be complete. It has to have gone through all the revisions that mean that your inner perfectionist is happy with it, or at least they don't absolutely hate it. And then you open the door and you take it to people that you trust. And then after you've taken it to people that you trust and taken on board that feedback, you start spreading out further and further, and you widen the circle very gradually. Just expanding the circle to anyone who's prepared to pay means you're going to get all kinds of people showing up and giving you opinions. If you're still at a developmental stage, which the age of Scorpius is absolutely still at a very early developmental stage, you're just going to get all kinds of different pieces of feedback, and not all of them will be useful or what you want to have received. It's very tricky. To make this all about me, I entered a competition over the summer that would have involved a public vote. People who were shortlisted were notified over the weekend, and I didn't receive an email, so I'm assuming I didn't get it. I had submitted the first 1,500 words of Bone Moth, and I was sort of hoping it would go somewhere. Then there was another part of me that was going, you don't stand a chance. Then another part of me that only popped up when I didn't get an email was very relieved that something that was really unready to be seen by the general public was not going to get put on display. I was very concerned that it would stop me writing. There are enough challenges in my life right now. I am in Freshers Week, so we start teaching in week 1 and week 2, and yeah, I've got enough on my plate without dealing with the public voting or not voting, or having comments or thoughts, or wanting to give me feedback on a very early draft of something that has changed in the couple of months since I actually submitted my entry. I was submitting because I was going for every chance I possibly could, but looking back, I'm kind of glad that I didn't get anywhere. Also sad that I didn't get anywhere, because the emotions are kind of complicated either way. You want to and you don't want to. I had a look at Audra's stuff, And that is very much an author sort of take. I do appreciate the drama people leaving at this point. I was intrigued. The first chapter, I have just one comment, and I think everybody has brought this up, is they're talking about the absence of the main character. From a lot of it is descriptive. The critical thing with first pages and your first paragraph, your first line, is having somebody there, having a person we can attach to. I am not sure why I'm supposed to care at all about Conviction Woods. Who cares? I don't care that it's uninhabitable. That happens to places. Why should I care about this place? The trick is one brought up by Donald Maas, who is one of the leading lights of literary agency. He does courses with Writer's Digest, and he has written several books. One of them is The Emotional Craft of Fiction, which is a really useful read. He explains how to do description really well by embedding it within a character. To go back to favorite thing up here, the first chapter of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings starts off with this kind of explanation of hobbits, introduces, but starts with a character. They all start with a character. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be in media res. That's a great way of getting people engaged, but you need to have a person who is experiencing what you're describing in order to make it effective. Donald Maas presents some ideas for doing that, for showing that when you describe a place, you must describe it from the perspective of that person, of that character. What are they looking at? How does it make them feel? What things do they miss? What things do they notice? That's always going to be the most fundamental thing. So that was what primarily came up for me when I had a look at the first chapter. I still have a lot of things to say as an epigrapher that I will leave potentially for another video, because she is telling a story that is essentially in my wheelhouse. The main character is essentially does what I do. Hey. The other thing that this second update from that perspective was kind of interesting. Looking at the handwritten outline, I noticed again that it's very much about what happens and not much about why things happen. Why is this all happening? Why does it matter? Why does Rowan not believe Raker at first? What's going on there? Why is there a moose? What is even happening? There seems to be a lot of what and not why. I don't know why you'd want an illustrated notebook of the history. History's just from an academic standpoint, and as someone who is currently writing a dark academia book set in a world that is kind of figuring out a missing patch of their own history, you kind of need to have lots of different sources of material. That's going to be a video for another time where I talk about all the different sources of material we have to understand just one aspect of our own past and our own history, and how difficult it is to interpret these things. So those were just my notes, that just there's a continual feeling that theme is missing, the sense that the characters do things without any sense of why they do those things and why they react the way they do. That's still absent from it, and that kind of makes me think, oh, you're not there yet, you've got a long way to go. Again, I still wish she would just go offline, quite frankly. It's kind of difficult to watch. I find it difficult to watch at times. That's why I've been doing other things and focusing on the Moomins and Ancient Magic, which I will come back to just as an update. I am spending all of this week doing videos that I hope to get a better schedule, because I kind of do want to do this. You're great people. You're fascinated by stuff. You tell me really interesting things. I learn so much from the comments section. It's amazing. So, like, comment, subscribe, do the thing. I'm very cautious. There's no need to do the Patreon thing. I do put out videos. I'm trying to do like little update videos just to get better at doing videos. And there is that there. There's a lot of bone moth type stuff, so if you're interested in my actual writing, there's that. I've got ideas to do videos on hypernormalization, which is something I'm fascinated by. Russia surviving the collapse of communism and how that is applicable to right now. obviously ancient medicine and magic. So, that's all coming up as long as I am able to focus for the rest of this week. Thank you very much for coming along and listening to my talk. I will try to make these videos much more regular and keep working on my editing skills. So thank you very much for watching.